In this presentation, I'm going to talk about weather-related problems. So my objectives are to understand how the body regulates temperature, learn how to identify the signs and symptoms of heat-related and cold-related illnesses, how to provide care for weather-related illnesses, and learn how to prevent weather-related illnesses. So we're going to start talking about temperature body regulation for our bodies. As we exercise, our body temperature increases. No surprise there. There's several methods for us to generate and to dissipate or get rid of the heat in our body. So we're going to talk about some of those ways that we do that. So metabolism is one way. As we increase cellular activity, we increase heat production in our body. This goes back to physiology. If you're taking any physiology, human physiology class, you learn this. Our next way is convection. So we lose heat or gain heat by the air. So the wind, air conditioning, or fans. If it's air is hotter, you get hotter, and vice versa. No real surprise there. So when we use our air conditioning, we're trying to cool ourselves by convection. Another way that we regulate our body temperature is through conduction. This is contact with another object. This is what we use when we're using ice bags, or we sit on a hot bench, or uniforms also are the way we regulate our body temperature. Another temperature regulation is radiation. This is the sun. So the sun provides a lot of radiation for us, especially here in the valley. Evaporation is sweating. This is the body's air conditioning system. The sweat cools us down. But if the humidity is over 80%, sweating becomes ineffective, or it's not as effective. So now we're going to talk about how we can prevent heat illness. This is a completely preventable issue or illness or condition. Common sense should really generate this. When it's too hot, maybe we should change the way that we exercise outside. Here's some common sense steps. Monitor weather conditions and adjust practices accordingly. So if it's super hot, maybe you shouldn't be out there, especially if your athletes aren't acclimated to it. We can also address not only heat, but also our air quality here in Fresno and Clovis in the Central Valley. So one of the best things we can do is acclimate our athletes to the weather. And we'll talk about each one of these steps in more detail. Proper clothing, identify and monitor susceptible individuals, enforce hydration, prohibit artificial weight reduction methods, and weight records. So again, I'm going to talk about each one of these in detail. So let's talk about monitoring the weather conditions. If, in Fresno and Clovis, this one typically is not an issue. If humidity is greater than 80% or over 80 degrees Fahrenheit, modify practice. Well, the 80% humidity we don't have to worry about. We definitely have to worry about the heat. So sometimes we want to practice in the early morning or late at night to help people get used to the heat. We want to use gradual acclimation. This is becoming used to or accustomed to exercising in hot temperature. And this is the most effective way to prevent heat illness and cold illness too. We really should do this at the beginning of our preseason. We may want to have them do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, or just 2 hours in afternoon to get them and make it easier. We may want to do 20 minutes of practice and 10 to 20 minutes of rest in the shade for the first 7 to 10 days. Whatever it takes to get the athletes used to practicing in the heat of here in our area in Fresno. And outside of Fresno, where it's more humid, you got to get them used to those temperature changes. We've come a long ways in our uniforms over the years. Now we have the uniforms that and wick the sweat away. So the proper clothing is very important. Use light uniform, shorts, t-shirts. With football, pads really hold in that heat, and they can't get rid of the heat. So we got to get them used to wearing their pads in the acclimation process. We also want to ID the susceptible individuals. These are the larger athletes, bigger people, overweight athletes. These are more susceptible to heat illness. Athletes, anybody who has sustained a heat illness in the past, like me, I didn't realize this when I was a middle school kid playing baseball. When I lived in a different state where we had high humidity, I suffered heat exhaustion, and I'm still pretty susceptible to heat illness. I just don't do well in the heat. So I know not to go out and do exercise when it's greater than like 85 degrees, or I'm going to have heat illness. Athletes taking certain medications, antihistamines, supplements, and those type of things cause people to dehydrate easier. They need to drink more fluids. Watch for extreme thirst, flushed skin, fatigue, cramps, apathy, weakness. All those, if you're thirsty, you're dehydrated. That's the key thing for yourself. If you're thirsty, you're dehydrated. Fluid replacement, drink hours before practice. Drink at regular intervals. Every 10 to 15 minutes. We need to allow the athletes to have unrestricted fluid replacement. If they want to drink, let them drink. Drink cold water. Water is the best item. One of the things I say about Gatorade is how they developed Gatorade. It was at the University of Florida. I had some exercise physiology professors. They were having a lot of cramping issues on their football team because it's very humid there. So they started to investigate what athletes were losing, meaning sweat. They analyzed sweat, and they figured out, well, if they're losing all that sweat, the electrolytes as it's called, we need to make a replacement. That's what Gatorade is. It's flavored sweat. It works very effectively because it's replacing the electrolytes that the athletes are losing when we drink. And there's a ton of different healthy, acceptable fluids to drink for our athletes to use. Red Bull is not one of them. Rockstar is not one of them. Coffee is not one of them. These are all dehydrators. They're called diuretics. They cause you to pee more. If you're peeing more, you're losing fluids. Water is really your best. Cold water is really your best thing to provide. The other one is artificial rate reduction methods. This is wrestling. I'm addressing wrestling quite a bit. These are some items that wrestlers use to cut their weight because they have to weigh at a certain level during their matches. They've done a better job in restricting all of these things because they've had quite a few people die because of these poor and unhealthy ways that wrestling has done their competitions. Weight records, we measure weight before and after practice without their just in shorts, not with their equipment on. A loss of 3 to 5% of body weight is too much. So if somebody's lost 3 to 5% of their body weight, athlete should be held out of practice until their normal body weight is regained. So these are all easy ways to prevent heat illness. Heat illness is the body's inability to maintain normal body temperature or dissipate the heat. Heat illness has the greatest chance of happening on days when the sun is bright and the temperature and relative humidity are high, greater than 80% on the humidity, and temperatures over 80 to 90 degrees. The three types of Heat illness or heat cramps, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. These are listed in the from least severe to the most severe. So heat cramps. Here you have muscle spasms that happen at the quads, the hamstrings, and the calf. You have profuse sweating that leads to loss of water and our electrolytes. So your muscles starts to cramp. And some of the ways we take care of this is drink more water or electrolytes, slam some Gatorade or whatever. A lot of water. You need to stretch that muscle, ice massage or ice massage the muscle. You just need to get that muscle spasm to calm down and start drinking more water. If this happens in the middle of a game, it tends to be a challenge. Some of you probably watched games where somebody's cramping up in the middle of the game. It's pretty challenging in the middle of the game because you don't want to drink too much water because then you feel lethargic because your belly's full of a bunch of water. That's why you need to be drinking water all day long. Heat exhaustion is our next most serious heat illness. This is caused by inadequate replacement of fluids because they're sweating so much. So just a key thing, you should try to notice the difference between the signs and symptoms, differences between heat exhaustion and heat stroke. So we have profuse sweating, cool, clammy, pale skin. We have body temperatures up to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. The person could be dizzy. They can have a rapid but weak pulse. They can have nausea, which again means they feel like they're going to throw up or they can actually puke. They can have a headache. So those are the key signs and symptoms. So they're still sweating here. And so they're cool, clammy, pale skin. All right. Here are treatment. Cool that person down. Ice towels, spray with moist, cool water. Get out of the heat. Get them to drink waters, fluids. Remove any restricted clothing if they're wearing, football pads. Take those pads off. Fan them down. Anything you can do to get them to cool down. They're not going to get any better. Can't make somebody work through this. If the condition does not improve within 30 minutes, you need to call 911 because they probably need to have intravenous fluids replacement. They're not going to get better. You can't make somebody just suck it up and get through this. They're not going to get through this. This is a very serious condition. This is a life-threatening condition because it can lead to heat stroke, which is a life-threatening condition, and this is an emergency. Our air conditioning system has shut down. It's completely off. Just like if you're in your house when it's 105 degrees outside and your air conditioning breaks, it gets super hot in your house. That's what's happening in our body. Now notice the difference here with these signs and symptoms. They have little or no sweat, whereas in heat exhaustion, they are sweaty. There's no sweat here. They have reddish and very hot skin, where in the other one, they have cool, clammy skin, and it's a little whitish, pale. Here we have a very strong and rapid pulse. They are breathing like a dog, and it's what I call a shallow breathing. Breathing like a dog. They may become unconscious. Their body temperature can go 106 or higher. Again, their air conditioning system has shut down. This is a life-threatening condition. Treatment here is you got to call EMS right now. Don't wait. Call. Get them out of the heat. Cool that body off, just like what we did in the previous with the heat exhaustion. If they're conscious, have them drink fluids. Remove that sweat-soaked clothing, fan them down, get them in cool air, get them in air conditioning, anything you can do to cool them down while you're waiting for the paramedics to arrive. Again, this is life-threatening. You have to call paramedics. With heat exhaustion, you can't, or heat stroke, you have to provide the right care or this person is going to die. Now we're going to switch to cold weather related illnesses. Again, these are preventable too. Appropriate clothing. Again, we've made a lot of great changes in clothing. Keep active to stay warm. Monitor the wind chill. Your textbook talks about the wind chill and how to monitor that. Monitor the athletes at risk. Stress hydration. Again, even though it's not, you would think drinking water in cold is not as important as it is when it's hot. It's actually just as important to continue to drink water when it's cold. You may not need to make it as cold as you would when it's a hot day, but they still need to drink water. It's very important. Now we're going to talk about the different types of cold-related illnesses. Frostbite. This is the tissue actually freezes just like a piece of meat in your freezer. It's caused by exposure to cold. Our signs and symptoms here: red or flushed skin may turn white or gray. Skin may blister. The skin is cold to touch. So what should we do for this person? Again, move to a warm area, get out of that cold, just like we did with the heat. Get them out of the heat. Get them out of the cold area. Remove any wet clothes. They may be wet from sweating. Rewarm by soaking in clean, warm water, not hotter than 105 degrees. So it should be warm, not hot. Okay, just warm. But do not rub the skin. Call parents of serious frostbite. Call 911. Okay, talking about dealing with kids. Hopefully you can prevent this before it gets too cold. If the person can't feel their fingertips, because this is going to happen in fingertips and the toes, that's when you need to start changing your way you're doing things on yourself. If you can't feel your fingertips or your toes, you're susceptible to frostbite. Next thing is hypothermia. Body temperature drops below 95 degrees. Here, they can have a loss of coordination, sensation, and consciousness. They're going to start to shiver because that is the body's mechanism for keeping warm, is shivering, just like sweating is the way that we cool ourselves off. Here, they're going to have pale, hard skin, difficulty breathing, slow, irregular pulse. Treatment here is call 911 because this is life-threatening again, just like with heat stroke. Monitor their airway, breathing, and circulation. Move to a warm area. Warm the athlete. Wrap in blankets. Do not rub the athlete, as this may cause the heart to stop. Give some warm fluids, not alcohol. No, just warm water. That's our end of this presentation. Just as a review, we talked about how the body regulates temperature, how to prevent heat and cold illnesses, what are the different kinds of heat and cold illnesses, and how to provide care for anybody who has a heat or cold issue.